Everybody, Kevin Purcell with Theotek, and we are here today with, first of all, our regulars, Antoine Wright from the wonderful town of Charlotte, just down the road, and also up the road in the New Jersey, Philadelphia area, because they've been talking Philadelphia football today. Our friend Wes Allen, and then in between those two, we have my good friend, used to pastor right down the road from me in Morganton, North Carolina, but now he has headed north for the fun of the wintry wonderland of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And this is Paul Culbertson, who's the pastor of Grace Community Church up there. Paul, welcome to Theotek.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here this morning.
Yeah, that's cool. We're glad that you're here as well. Paul and I haven't really talked a whole lot. We've just kind of gone back and forth a little bit on text and Facebook since he left. How long has it been now?
About 8 months.
Yeah, about 8 months. So how are you enjoying being up there in the Upper Peninsula?
It was a beautiful winter. I'm from the north originally, so I missed the winter. Saw a ton of snow, but it's been 50 degrees all week, so the snow is rapidly going away.
Disappearing. How are things at Grace Community Church?
Grace is doing well. It's been probably one of the smoothest transitions I've ever had coming into a church. It was done well on so many different levels with the previous pastor. He was an awesome man, and he prepared the church well for me coming in, and we've just seen a good growth since then. So it's been exciting.
Well, cool. That's interesting. I'm originally from Wisconsin, and so I used to live in Milwaukee, just what is that, about 5 hours from you probably?
Yeah, about 4.5, yep.
Yeah, something like that. Well, listen, we're excited that you're here. We thought we'd just begin by talking a little bit. Paul is not only a pastor and a Detroit Lions fan, which is, we'll forgive him of that, but he is...
Forgive him, we'll just give him condolences.
What's that, Wes? Say it again.
Forgive him, we'll just give him condolences.
Yeah, that's probably more likely the case, especially this year. Anyway, he's also a confirmed geek, and Paul and I actually met more as Apple fanatics than we did as pastor friends. That's not true, actually. We met at the pastors' conference in our community first, but I drove by having picked up my first iPad from the FedEx store, and there was Paul and a buddy of his sitting in a line in front of the Best Buy in Hickory, just down the road from us, waiting for the doors to open so he could buy his. And so sometimes we talk Bible stuff, sometimes we talk geek stuff and software and things like that. But Paul, you're a geek. What do you first of all, for Bible software, what do you use for Bible software, and why?
I use Logos for Bible software, and I probably use it because that's what I got introduced to about about 7, 8 years ago now, and I've gotten so familiar with it that it's kind of second nature. That's what I go to, and I think they've done a great job on the Mac end of it, especially with their new update to Logos 6. Pretty powerful. I mean, everything's right there at my fingertips, and being able to bring in all the books you want, all of my commentaries, and have everything wide open to whatever I'm studying. It's just, I don't know, I think it really does save me a ton of time.
Yeah, if people aren't familiar, we did a demonstration with, and I've forgotten the fellow's name, someone from Logos a couple months ago, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And that's on our YouTube channel if you want to look at that. It was very useful, very beneficial, even for me as someone who's been using Logos for, more than probably about 10 years now. Not only, but that is, sort of my first, my go-to app. But so that was helpful, seeing all the new features, and they did a lot of new stuff that's kind of cool. I've also been a little frustrated with them, but we won't go into all that. What about for like you? Your church is one that does presentation. A lot of just tell us about your worship and what you use in that setting.
Right now in our worship setting, we use Pro Presenter, and it's pretty phenomenal. If you're not familiar with ProPresenter, it just kind of is take something like on a Mac, and it would take Keynote and kind of amplify that by about 1,000, and same thing with Microsoft PowerPoint, what you're able to do with it, and multi-screen and blend in and out. We live stream our services on Sunday, and the only software we use for that is ProPresenter, as far as how we blend in and out, and it just does a phenomenal job. So ProPresenter is our go-to on Sunday mornings. We also use Planning Center Online. We don't use their video presentation aspect of what they do, but we use them for the organizational aspect of contacting everyone who's on that Sunday and setting up music. Our worship pastor does all that, and that's pretty phenomenal as well.
Yeah, I've tried that, and don't, honestly, we had, the first thing I got was Media Shout, and so I just kind of have stuck with that because I've got it. I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't think it's the greatest thing in the world, but it it's cheap because we own it already. If you know what I mean. So that's why we go with it. And I've never really used Planning Center at all. Have either of you, Wes or Antoine, have either of you touched on that?
No, I mean I basically just use a Google form. So.
You'd use a what? I'm sorry?
I use it to do all the planning stuff. We basically just use a Google form, and the people who are in charge of the different aspects of putting together aspects of worship all have access to seeing what's in it. So it just works well, and it's free.
For planning, I don't use anything other than sitting and talking to the guy who does our music, because he's not. I mean, he just got a smartphone like 6 months ago, and the only reason he got one is because he had a grandchild, and his daughter said, "Dad, I would love to be able to send you pictures, but your old phone won't let me do that." So he got a smartphone just to be able to get pictures of his grandkids. I don't think he's even installed any apps on it, but so that's kind of what we don't have a lot of people involved in that kind of thing. But well, that's cool. I am one of these that we've talked a lot on Theotek about technology doesn't need to be the end; it needs to be a means to an end. And I know Paul feels that way. We've talked a lot about that. One of the interesting things, since three of us here at least are Mac users, was the announcement this week of, first of all, the Apple Watch. We talked a little bit about that in the past, and then also the new MacBook. What did you guys think of those?
Actually, I'm interested. Antoine, talk after you finish chewing. Tell me what your thoughts are on the watch.
I mean, it wasn't something that I didn't expect. However, I will confess, I woke up thinking about the Apple Watch this morning, which is not really a good sign.
So do you count this as a nightmare scenario, or is that a good thing?
Well, I mean, one of the things, and I agree with a lot of the folks who did an analysis of the event, when Apple got to the portion of talking about the Apple Watch, the presentation was really choppy, because you kind of felt that Apple didn't exactly know how to explain the value behind removing the need for their most lucrative product to be in your hand, And so for the Apple Watch, I love how Apple is leveraging their logistical strength to basically make a very personal thing. Whether you want to call it fashion or gadget, doesn't really belittle the point. They are very much flexing their muscles. They're like the Spurs, they're being them. I do think that right now the Apple Watch is missing the smart in the watch. It does some really, really neat things. I love the idea of being able to share your heartbeat or to sketch a note to somebody else, because that starts to get you into thinking of technology that does more than just present to you stuff. I'd like to see some more command and control interfaces from it. You know, they talked a little bit about replacing your keys, replacing your wallet. You know, and so I'd like to see a little bit more of that. And bending this to our conversation, I'd like to see churches to be able to start saying, hey, listen, we need to start seriously considering Apple Pay and Google Wallet, for giving and things of that sort. Because when you do have a control center on your wrist, you have a smartwatch on your wrist, you can probably get away with doing some command control things that you couldn't do as easily before, or you had to sit in front of a larger workstation or do some workarounds with. So that's kind of where I am with it. I'd like to see a little bit more, maybe from Apple, maybe from some developers that figured it out already. But it's polished. It's really polished.
The battery life. I mean, the reports were coming out. This thing would have like 5 hours of normal use battery life, and they got it through. And they announced 18. You think how realistic do you think that actually is?
Very, because Apple doesn't lie. They're the one.
True. They never puff their battery life. They've never lied about that.
Okay, that's better.
They really don't puff their battery life, which is, when I got the iPad, when I first got the iPad, remember that day it snowed in May when I got the iPad?
Yeah.
When I got the iPad, that was the first thing I put to the test. I said, there's no way this thing is going to last 8 hours on Wi-Fi the whole time. I sat in a coffee shop for 8 hours, and that thing lasted the whole 8 hours. It didn't go 8.5. It didn't go 6. That thing went a full 8 hours, and it's a pretty well-established fact. Apple's battery numbers usually don't lie. Those folks that are saying 5 hours, 6 hours with it, nobody's going to be sitting down looking at a 2-inch screen for 5 hours at a time. That's just not going to happen. Those folks that are too connected, have every notification known to man, hitting on their watch, they're going to write in 3 months how they're going to throw away their Apple Watch because it buzzes too much. I think those folks are unrealistic. But can it last for 18 hours? Sure. Would you wear it going to sleep? Probably not. So yeah, 18 hours works.
What do you think of the price?
I want a $10,000 one. Okay. Let me get this since this is online. So Kevin, since you always seem to get good stuff, April 10th, this stuff is supposed to be pre-ordered. April 12th is my birthday.
Congratulations! Because I promise you one thing. Kevin ain't buying an Apple Watch for himself or no one else.
I want a gold one with a green. I want the little, I want a gold one with a green band because that doesn't exist.
My whole thing with the Apple Watch is it's utterly fascinating because I have next to no interest in it, and that's not to say that it's not a polished device, and it's not. I think it is probably the best implementation of a smartphone that's currently going to market. That's currently out there.
Well,
I have smartwatch. I have no desire to get one because I'm not a watch person. So for me, spending $350 or $400 on a watch makes absolutely no sense. Like I don't even like going to the amusement park and getting that stupid plastic band around my wrist. I can't wait to get the stupid thing off. But the weird thing is that you listen to watch people, and they don't look at this as though it's a tech gadget. They're looking at it as this incredibly designed watch, and they're going, it's only $400? I mean, this is the most bizarre product release for Apple that I have ever seen because they're going after a completely new segment. I think Jonathan Ive was entirely correct. Switzerland has got to be freaking out because the people who buy these expensive watches are all looking at the Apple Watch going, well, heck, I want that. And those $10,000 watches are going to sell out, which boggles my mind because I literally don't understand why someone would spend $200 on a watch, much less $400 or $700 or $10,000 on a watch. Like the whole Rolex thing, I don't get it. But watch people, they are going out of their gourd excited. And this is, to me, just from an observer, this is amazing to watch. I'm like, okay, this is really cool.
Oh, what do you think?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, I've been an Apple geek for a long time. Ever since Windows Vista came out and I switched over to Mac, I've never went back. So that saying, once you go Mac, you don't go back. But anyways, what I would say is that I was shocked, if I'm honest, that the aluminum Apple Watch to the stainless steel Apple Watch was a $200 increase. I thought that, man, I think the price is a little up there for that switch. But the one thing that entices me about the Apple Watch is I've read several articles from these guys that have been testing them out, and I have a couple of close friends that work for Apple in North Carolina at the Maiden plant, and one of them got to fly out there and be a part of the big event out there in California. But the thing that is surprising me the most is that the people who have actually spent over a month with the watch already said the biggest difference to them is that they're not on their phones all the time. They think that has actually saved them time because they're not on their phone, which sounds kind of weird because you need your phone in your pocket for the Apple Watch to actually do everything that it's going to do. But
it's a glance device.
Huh?
It's a glance device.
Yes, yes. And so I think that that's the aspect, I think, for me, if that proves to be something good, because I can be guilty of being on my phone too much. So for that aspect, I'm interested. I have never, ever been a watch person in my life. But for some reason, probably because I'm an Apple geek, and Kevin would say I bow down to the God of Apple, even though I'm a pastor. I would say that this is the first watch that I want to get. But Kevin, I want to know about the watch you've been wearing, because I saw you tweet pic your, I don't know which one you had on. Was that the new Android one you had on?
Well, here's my response. What I think of the Apple Watch. No, seriously, that's just funny. I'm not that anti anything relating to Apple. My biggest complaint about the Apple Watch is I'm not a high-end watch guy. You know, so those people that you were mentioning, Wes, I don't understand those people.
Yeah.
They have more money than sense, in my view. But again, I don't think I should really judge them, even though I am sort of. So, if they've got the money and they can afford it, God bless them. It's if they're paying their tithe and helping their fellow man, then what they do with the rest of the cash is up to them, and I don't begrudge them their Apple Watch or their mansion, or if Stephen Furtick wants $1 million mansion and a $10,000 Apple Watch, and he can afford it because he sells lots of books, go for it, buddy. I don't understand. I don't think it looks that great. I mean, just as a aesthetics thing, I think I backed the Pebble Time Steel, which is a Kickstarter project that's going to come out in June or July, depending on which one you got. And I think that their gold Pebble looks as good as the Apple Watch. I'll pull up a picture of it for you so you can see it. And maybe it's just because I backed it, and so I'm sort of. It's like, hey, what I got's better than what you got, pal. There's some of that probably in there, but
I am interested in the Pebble Time just because it's a color e-ink screen, which I have been waiting years for.
Yeah, and see, it'll last 7 hours. It works with both Android and
7 days, won't it?
I'm an Android first person. I have an iPhone. Well, I carry 2 phones because we got rid of our home phone, and because I write about tech products, and so I want to be able to know about both. If I wasn't a part-time tech blogger, I wouldn't own 2 phones. It's just because that's what the money I make from writing. I throw at gadgets. I don't make any money. At the end of the year, my tax return says that my writing business breaks even because I throw it all at tech gadgets. And so, and this is one of the ones that I backed. I think that looks awesome. I mean, I think that's beautiful in my opinion.
I think it looks really, really good. How much is the steel time going to be?
It's going to be $250 if you buy it at retail. I backed it, so it's earlier than that, and so it's a little bit less.
I think $250 is even out for me. I mean,
$229 I think was the initial buy-in. if you got in early, which I did. So I think that's right. I'm not. Don't quote me on those prices because I don't remember, and I'm not going to bother going to it right now.
Yeah, I do think that it looks stunning.
I think there are some interesting features on the Apple Watch, but none of them are going to be game changers when it comes to Android Wear versus Pebble versus that. Now, you were asking about my watch. I have the Moto 360, you know, and
How
to be
thick is
honest
it?
with you,
Turn the profile, Kev.
it's a little thick. Okay.
A lot thick.
Yeah, it's way thick.
Yeah.
I got girly wrist. It's a lot thick.
Okay, but the Apple Watch is almost as thick as this. It's almost totally. There's very little difference between the two. The Apple Watch to me looks like a pregnant square. You know, I mean, because it looks pretty big, I think. And the only thing that makes the Apple Watch look better than, say, this are the bands. Well, see, this says universal bands. I can put any band I want on this.
Right.
And so I can go down to the store and buy a $300 band if I want and put it on here, and it'll look pretty cool, you know. Now I don't like. This is, I think, the best Android Wear watch out now.
No.
It's got this little flat tire at the bottom, which annoys me to death.
Wait, what is it? It's not edge to edge.
Me their watch, and as a loaner, but that looks awfully sharp. I don't know if you've seen the Huawei Android Wear watch. When that finally comes out, that's going to be the most beautiful Android Wear watch available, and I think it will compete with the quality and the look of the low-end Apple Watch easily. But it's going to be $150 less.
But what about functionality?
What's that?
What about functionality? I've read a lot of things on the Android Watch and the Pebble Watch. I mean, they don't touch what you're going to be able to do compared to the Apple Watch.
All right, now tell me what the Apple Watch can do that these can't do.
I think it's just the developer end, and that was the one aspect I was really disappointed in the Apple Watch presentation too. Like Antoine said, I think they missed. I think they missed out on telling you what was going to make this really worth your time, and I think that is all going to end up coming on the developer side of it. But what I've read in a lot of articles on the developer side is there's like 1,000 apps that are going to launch on day one of this sucker, and that's going to, what you're going to be able to do with that compared to, both the Android Wear watch and the Pebble watch. I mean, that's where I think the big game changer is going to come in.
Well, there's already at least there are thousands of apps on both Android Wear and Pebble.
The big difference between the two,
At
though?
launch, there's going to be far more apps on Android Wear and Pebble than there will be on Apple.
Well,
I've seen
with Pebble,
features
with Pebble,
on
y'all got to
Apple
remember
Watch. Hang on just a second, Antoine. We're talking over each other. I've seen a few features on the Apple Watch that are interesting, okay? Like, the Dick Tracy, you can talk to your watch. Well, I had the Samsung Gear.
I hate that.
And you could do that, and I never used it.
Yeah.
The notification where it taps you, okay, cool, but why is that better than Buzz? I don't understand the difference. With my watch, sometimes I want to take it off while I'm typing, okay? So I take it off and lay it down. It still buzzes, so I still know I got a notification. So I could say that's better, but I don't. It's just different. It's not better, it's different. I think the reason people think that the Apple Watch has better functions is because they like Apple better than they like the other team, and so I'm on Team Apple, and so whatever Apple does is better, even if it's not. I'm not on any team, honestly. I love Apple. I love Google. I love my Pebble that I used to have. I gave it up when I got the Android Wear, but I'm going to give this one up to wear the Pebble again. If Apple made a watch that was as good and as good a value, I'm talking about the price, then I'd probably be excited about it, and I'd switch and start using my Apple phone or my iPhone more often. That's the problem. The Android watch has better value because of the price than the Apple.
See,
Because hang on, just one second. I'll get you in here in just a second. The Apple Watch, the low-end Apple Watches, in my opinion, are ugly, and so you got to pay $600 to get a good-looking Apple Watch, in my opinion. But that's taste. All right, Antoine, I've been shutting you up, so go ahead.
Well, let me say this first about the Pebble, because you made a good point. What's the actual functionality difference? From the tech side, a lot of us have been looking at the functionality differences between the watches, and there really isn't major differences between the watches. Most Android Wear watches have NFC, have the ability to do tap to pay, receive notifications. Pebble, just because of their ecosystem being a lot older, they have a few mobile wallet apps, so you can get away with some of those scanning your barcodes. There's like a Starbucks app for your Pebble, so you can go ahead and do your Starbucks scanning, or your Harris Teeter supermarket type scanning app. You got all of that for Pebble, so you have that functionality like you would have for Apple. To that end, there's no difference. So functionality wise, that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin, I think was mentioned right before I got a nice little system RAM issue. Mental note: get me a Pixel soon too. The fashion side of things is, what do you want to be seen wearing? And I know we speak a lot of times about getting the thing that's of attainable value and stewardship of our technology. We've talked about that before a few times here. It's pretty important to us, not just getting the cheap thing, but doing the best thing with your money as you can. Yeah, an Android Wear or a Pebble, makes sense as a value call, to a degree. And then for some people, the Apple Watch is going to make a better sense as a value call. But when we start talking about value, there's perceived value and actual value. And I think right now the perceived value of the Apple Watch is a lot greater than that of Pebble or Android Wear or anybody else for that matter that's doing wearables. That because of Apple's track record with software, because they don't force you to buy an iPad every time a new one comes out, because those folks with a 4S just got another OS upgrade, that kind of perceived value kicks in. And it's like, well, I'm going to pay $350, yeah, but I'm also not going to have so many Apple Watches released in front of me that I feel like that crap, I got to get a new one, and that it doesn't have any real value to it. Apple's going to make this, a longer lasting or a longer feeling product than what some of the other platforms have pulled off. I think Pebble is trying to get over that perception, and they're doing that from the retail end. But Android Wear, to this end, they have the stench of Google. You have Android Wear devices being released in a very similar pace that early Android devices were being released. It's not one at a time. It's like 4 or 5 at a time. And then, are the old ones upgradable? And if they're not upgradable, are the old ones even functional with my new phone, because I'm going to drop and lose my phone? That perceived value.
NFC for payment, are they secure anymore?
Well, yeah, because Google just had a big old breach, as a matter of fact.
Wes, I didn't hear you. I don't know if we all.
Well, the stigma of Android is that you buy a device and then there's all these vulnerabilities that come out. I mean, there's still people who are running gingerbread devices.
Yeah, but that's a rare thing, and those vulnerability issues are the Apple community likes to talk about that, but those of us who use Android on a regular basis don't experience it. So
we're about to. Did y'all read the report this morning?
No.
Okay, so apparently there was a really bad hiccup with a certificate for Google from the Google Apps domain, and if you have registered your domain with Google Business or Google Apps, and you decided that Who's will hide your identity and all that other good information, your information has just been leaked because somebody did a snafu.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a small percentage of people though that's going to be affected.
280.
Here's the real loser. I want to ask you guys about this. Here's the real loser in this wearable. I'm not piling on here. I'm not trying to say Microsoft, but Microsoft is doing some great stuff. but no one knows it. Because things like this thing, you know, I've never used one, but every person that I've talked to who has thinks it's really cool. But no one has a clue because Microsoft is just so uncool these days. Windows 10, best operating system I've ever used. Better than Mac, OS 10, better than any Windows for sure. But, you know, it's Windows, and so there's people like Paul who say once you go Mac, you never go back. Well, see, I went Mac, and now I'm going back, so that's not entirely true. But, see, I'm kind of weird in that. And then, you know, Microsoft Office for Mac, this new one is pretty good, and they're putting all their apps everywhere. So, you know, they're in trouble, aren't they?
Well, I think...
Nah, I disagree.
You disagree that they're in trouble?
Go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say, I think Windows 10, first of all, I agree, Kevin. Hands down, best Windows. I messed around with it and I don't remember which store I was at, but somebody was profiling it and sending it out. It looks amazing. I told my wife even it's the best Windows product I've seen in a long, long time. But here's the issue. It's almost like a little too late to the game. And all of these people who have, outside of people who have the financial resources to have both, Apple has done such a good job building their setup from Mac OS to their Web OS, you know, to all of their devices that I think a lot of people are like, man, if I switch back to Windows, I got to change everything about my life. Where they already have their iPads, they already have their iPhones, they already have their Mac at home, everything hands off now, everything switches so easily. You can pick up, I can finish on pages here, pick it up over there. And now all of a sudden Windows does finally have a cool product and a great operating system. I just think for a lot of people it's just a little too late to the game.
Well, here's an interesting alternative to that viewpoint. And now this is old, but these numbers still bear out. They're still pretty close. And that is Windows 8 outpaces OS 10 Mavericks by 5-1. And so while you know those who are in an OS 10 bubble who talk to OS 10 people, you know, the Mac people that we have as friends, you know, I use both on a regular basis. And by the way, the Surface Pro 3, Apple wished they had something that good. Anyway, you know, it so outweighs what's going on. Now, here they're saying user adoption. Apple is trying to claim that they're doing better. It's just they're fudging the numbers. It's not true. There are far more Windows computers out there today than there are Macs.
Well, see, so one of the things about Windows, I mean, you bring up a point, but it's there are two sides to the Windows argument that a lot of times get missed in our discussions. Windows is an enterprise operating system before it's a consumer operating system. They just made it accessible, consumer ready, but it was never friendly for consumers. Windows and 10 is really not going to change this. It requires a system admin. You know, it's just the way it is as a platform. And to that end, enterprises who get Windows 10 with their service agreements, who are locked in 4, 5, 6 more years for their service agreements, they're not going to break their service agreement with Microsoft, lose Office just to gain OS X or just to gain, you know, anything else really. They will stay with Windows, you know, literally for the foreseeable, and Microsoft knows that. Microsoft understands, though, that they don't have any consumer mindset, and so I think their idea of doing Windows everywhere, having Microsoft Health being the focus of what they're doing, having Office everywhere, SharePoint everywhere, etc. Those kind of things will allow them to make the leap later on when they get back into that consumer consciousness that, hey, Microsoft makes some really kick butt hardware. Yeah, you really want this, and you're already using Microsoft products on your iPad, on your Android device, on your BlackBerry, wherever. Add your account to this Windows device, and it gets enhanced from here. And that's the discussion that Microsoft can do once they turn around that perception that they that they're usable anywhere and anyhow. Until that happens, though, Microsoft is they're going to bleed market share. They're going to bleed some usage in the home, but overall they're not going to bleed as much usage as it looks like. You know.
Well, also you said that Windows, you have to you have to have a sysadmin on Windows. I don't understand that. What you mean by that? But I think what you mean is you have to have a admin account, and then you have to run as a non-administrative user. But that's
no. I mean, it requires a lot of work.
It requires a lot.
I just mean it requires a lot more work than most folks want to deal with. Nobody wants to deal with virus scanners, thinking about malware on their everything.
Here's a recent report that I saw recently. A number of different security companies, and it turns out the single most vulnerable operating system in the world right now is Apple Mac OS X, and then iOS.
Yeah, I read the report, and it's wonderful. I mean, it shows what you can do with statistics. I mean, really, it really does.
What I like, it's fudging the statistics.
No, it's not. I totally agree with Antoine about the whole thing. I just recommended to a retiring Catholic priest, because he wanted to get a tablet and a laptop to take with him into retirement, and he doesn't have a lot of money. And I said, get a Surface Pro 3.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to. And he got it, and he adores it. I mean, like it was funny. I was just preaching over there for our Lent midweek series, and he came into the robing room where I was sitting with the deacon who was leading the worship service, and he walked in. He's like, "Oh, Wes, you have to come and look at it." And he drugged me back to his office just to show me his Surface Pro 3. I think Microsoft is going to become an Apple. They're going to make a hardware. They're going to become a hardware-first company. And that's how they're going to get back into consumer mindset.
So what do you think of this?
What, the Pixel?
Yeah, this new Chromebook Pixel.
One of these days I'm going to pick up a Chromebook just because I think they're really cool.
I like my Chromebook. I want one.
Yeah, I think it is. But that's the whole thing, Kev. Is that anytime you see I get skeptical anytime I see anything that says this is the most ever, because the headline's link bait. And I don't even, when I see Mac people write about Microsoft, about how stupid it is. I mean, it's just like, yeah, that's great, and we all like to pump up our own cult, and it's such a nice thing. But I always look at stuff like that with a skeptical ear. It's just how I'm wired. I'm kind of cynical that way in general. But I think Microsoft, right now they are in trouble, but they have enough cash to make a long play. And the Surface Pro, which tells you right now where their current bread and butter is, because it's Pro, that's the start of the long play, and we'll see how they go. If Steve Ballmer was still in charge of Microsoft, I would say they're going to die, because Steve Ballmer was an idiot. I mean, I don't have anything good to say about anything that he did at Microsoft. He tried to make a consumer OS, and we ended up with Windows 8, which was insane.
Yeah, but most of Windows 10 started development under his tenure, actually.
Yeah, it started development, but Steve Ballmer didn't know what he wanted Microsoft to be.
That's the problem, yeah.
He didn't know, and he had the '90s mindset of, well, we were just talking about that before we even went on, Kev. He had the '90s mindset of, well, if we don't own it, we'll just buy it.
Yeah.
And that's how we ended up with, we don't even know what the heck to call the new interface in the thing, because they started with Metro, and the guy wouldn't sell them the rights to the trademark for the name, and so they had to change it to something else, and now we refer to it like Print. You know, it's the interface formerly known as Metro.
Yeah.
And now they're calling it Modern, and it's...
Paul, let's get your...
still in charge. I would be really...
Are you, I know you're a Mac fan, but, you know, what do you think of... Is Windows dead? Are they going out of style? Is it too late for them?
I think if Windows has any chance, I'm going to have to agree. You know, it's going to that Surface Pro 3 is just it's a great tablet. Even this Chromebook, even the new Chromebook Pixel. I mean, you can't really I'm not the guy that's going to bash it and say that they're not good products. I think that they both finally stepped up. It's good to see Chromebook. It's good to see Google step up with something that is more than $150 laptop that, ultimately, yeah, it'll do all right, but that new Chromebook, that's probably going to be a phenomenal piece of work. But there is still that aspect for me that I just think they're a little late. They're a little late. But at the same time, Microsoft, the big push that I see from them, not only on the hardware, but also in their ability to take Windows 10 to the Xbox One, to their phones. I think that they are doing something that is unique. I kind of would, if I'm honest, even though I'm an Apple guy, I would love to see Apple get there where they're taking the same OS and it is used on all devices all the way across. I think that's going to be an interesting move once it fully comes out, where you're using Windows 10 on if you have a Windows phone, you're using it on your Xbox One at home, you're using it on your Surface Pro 3, and everything is the same. So I'm interested to see how that's going to turn out.
Yeah, if they can pull it off,
if you want to look at Windows 10 now, you can go download it. It's free. But this Microsoft issue has affected, getting back to what our bread and butter is, and that is church and Bible technology. Looking over here at one of the venerable Bible technology companies, Logos, who's been around not as long as QuickVerse, which I often like to talk about as one of the earliest and definitely far from the best today. But Logos, they couldn't even make a go of it with a Windows Metro/Modern UI app. They had to pull theirs, and so now what they're doing with this thing is they just decided this week, tell you what, if you really want a Windows Universal app, because in their forums when you go in there, people are begging them, please develop a Windows Universal app that's as good as the desktop app. So they said, all right, if you really want one, put your money where your mouth is. Logos has this thing called community. Let's see, what is this, a pre-pub or a community pricing? I can't remember.
They're kickstarting it, basically.
Well, it's sort of. See, they've been doing this for years. Logos has with books. They say, if you really want that book, then bid, and if we get enough bids, then we'll make it. If we don't get enough bids, then we won't make it. And so they said that. Said, here's the suggested price that you can bid. Community pricing, that's what it is. If enough people bid $19, then we'll do it. Well, notice what I bid. Okay.
11?
I said, all right, I'll bid $11. And the only reason I bid 11 is because I couldn't go 10. Okay, because the way it works here.
That's very strange.
I don't think it's worth $19, to be honest with you. I wouldn't pay $19 for a Windows.
For a universal app that you would use on every device?
Right, and here's why. Apple or Logos runs great on my Surface Pro as a desktop application.
And that's what you want.
And that's what I want, okay? I pull off the pen and I hit the tiny little buttons that are not created for tap interface, okay? And so I'm happy with that. They make a free iOS app. They make a free Android app. And so if Logos wants to make a free Windows app, go for it. Now, see, I don't own a Windows phone, and I don't own a 7-inch Windows tablet or even an 8-inch Windows tablet. I got a 12-inch Surface Pro, and so this isn't for me. The only reason I actually would want this is my son. I gave my son a HP Stream 11 notebook. It's $150, and it's actually a really nice piece of hardware for $150. Its only weakness is it has a 32 gigabyte SSD inside, and 10 of that is recovery partition. That if you delete it, you kill your computer, and that's really sad because they have yet to find a way to create. Most computers like that, you can take that recovery partition, put it on a USB stick, and then delete it. If you do that with this HP, then you're calling HP and say, can you please restore this for me because I've screwed it up really bad. And people have had to do that. And so it's a bad decision to do that. I don't know why they did that. But, so you're really, out of that 32, you're getting 22. Windows takes up 10. My own Logos library is about 14 gigabytes because I've got a huge library. So I can't install it on his computer. Now it's got an SD card on it, but running Logos on an SD is not a good idea. It's
Well, that's got to be
really
fun.
slow. And so what I'd like to see is a universal app where I don't have to download all of the apps onto all of the books in my library onto his computer, because he's only going to use the Bibles, some commentaries, some of the language study stuff. He's not going to use all the stuff that I've got in there. I don't even use all the stuff I've got in there, to be honest with you. But see, Logos can't do it. Before we got on the air, we had a discussion about the different groups, Accordance and Bible Works, and, are they going to have the resources to develop an app for, Windows Phone and this universal, if they've already got a desktop app? And I don't think they're going to. I don't think Olive Tree has multiple apps, and Logos has multiple apps, and Loridian has multiple apps, but the only reason they're on Mac is because they did a Kickstarter campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And there's almost no one else that's going in multiple directions. Word Search has, the desktop app, and then they have an iOS app and an Android app. But their iOS and Android app are terrible.
Kevin, do you think that they are going to? One thing that I think Logos is eventually going to do is they're going to become web-based, and it's going to eliminate all of the issue. So then you're going to be able to pull it up on your Chromebook, your Windows, and you're going to be able to log in and have access to all of the, your aspects of Logos is going to be right at your fingertips on a web-based platform.
Yeah, I think they're going to go in that direction. But if that's the only offering that they have, they're going to lose a lot of customers, because they have a lot of people who work in the mission field and who work on throttled internet connections out of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And if that happens, then they are going to be they're going to really anger a lot of people. So I don't think they'll go entirely.
It's not the anger that's going to be to worry about. It's going to be the publishers that's been their issue.
Yeah, they'll freak out.
Some years ago, about 2 years before Biblia came out from Logos, Bob Pritchett and I had a really nice sit down as to what the future of Logos could be, and I just said to him, you guys really need to look at an Amazon method where you don't rely on people having everything locally stored. You get some of the things online, you get some of the things offline. And he said, that's a really good idea, and we fleshed some stuff out, and they ran into a very significant road bump with some of their publishers. The way that their agreements are set up with many of their publishers, they cannot offer something online to one user across multi-devices for a lot of the non-Bible type items that they offer. The publishers just won't allow it. And because of that, it's that publishing hurdle, that hurdle is Logos's and Accordance's and Olive Tree's. That's their issue with not having universal apps or being a web-based front end to a library that can go anywhere. The publishers don't want that. The publisher wants you to purchase a different version for every type of media that you're going to. And until that gets solved, the idea of a universal app is going to be a very hard problem to solve. Now, from a platform's perspective, Logos could throw the money at doing a Windows universal app, and it would negate the need for them to maintain a desktop app, because that's pretty much what the universal app would do in part. The question for Logos is the user base going to move to Windows 8, 8.1, 10, and further, where a universal app makes a lot more sense? Or are there users mostly using XP, Vista, and 7, where putting the resources towards building a universal app doesn't make much sense? And that's probably more core the reason.
Well, and the biggest flag about universal apps, that here again, I don't know why on earth Microsoft made this decision. How on earth did they release Windows 8 and not have a modern UI version of Microsoft Office? If you wanted to tell developers any better signal, developing this way is a really risky proposition, you couldn't have thought a better, unless you sent them cards that said, don't develop this way.
Yeah, I have your answer for that, and that is because of the way Microsoft is set up as a company.
And that's the problem.
I listen to a podcast called Windows Weekly on the Twit Network with Paul Thurrott, who's very knowledgeable about Windows and Microsoft itself. And they're set up as a company with divisions that are very competitive against one another. And the Microsoft Office division is the behemoth. Windows actually sort of cows to them in that company, at least the way he described it, or at least they're
exactly what it is.
And so basically, it was Office said we're not making that because that's too much work. We're more interested in keeping what we've got because we don't want to make extra work for ourselves, and we don't want to anger our bread and butter, and that is your corporations who pay most of the bills.
That's what now every developing house is thinking.
Right.
Because Microsoft itself came to the same conclusion.
Right. Yeah, it was stupid. And that's why they're getting away from it in Windows 10. I don't think the Metro UI, if you want to call it that, in Windows 10 is almost unnecessary. It's still there for people who want it.
And it's there for people who are on those devices, on the devices where it's where it makes sense. An 8-inch.
Yeah, but on the desktop, it's you don't hardly see it.
But then again, you're not going to use a desktop interface on an 8-inch tablet or a phone.
Yeah, well, and that gets to what Paul was just saying. Paul, you said that you would like to see Apple go in the direction of using one interface to rule them all. I'll be honest with you, if Apple makes their desktop system iOS-like and iOS-centric, I'm gone. I'm not putting up with that. What do you think?
Well, isn't that what Windows is doing now?
No, in fact, they were, but they're going in the opposite direction now.
Well, isn't that what they just announced though? Was it CES or something about how Windows 10 is going to be their flagship, and it's going to run on their phones, their Xbox, their.
Yeah, but it's not, and the interface changes per device, Kev, so I think that's more what Paul's talking about. If we can get the same operating system everywhere, the interface doesn't have to be the same everywhere.
Right, yes.
The same way Microsoft is doing it. It's Windows 10 everywhere, but if you're on a phone, you're not on the desktop, because that would be stupid.
Right.
We tried that with that type of device. Anybody remember OQO? No. What a great way to use Windows XP on a 3.5-inch screen.
In every Mac OS 10 computer, you have this.
Yeah, great. That's
and I would be at all surprised if somewhere in the near future they flip the switch, and this becomes the primary interface.
No.
You'll have to.
No. That's like I don't buy that at all.
Well, I disagree with you. I think that's where they're headed. Why did they put this in here then?
It's the Apple Watch interface. That's where they're going. Seriously.
Why is this here then?
Because there are some vestiges from 1960s computing that folks can't get rid of.
This was invented.
That's basically an iPad interface.
Yeah, this was invented, 2 or 3 versions of OS 10 ago?
I think the reason why Launchpad is there is because they had a bunch of people who were first-time Mac buyers from iPad, and they went, here, let's make things easier for you.
Well, but you have to click to get to it.
No, I use a finger swipe.
Okay, but you have to do a finger swipe to get to it. One way or the other, you have to do
something. I use the same finger swipe to get to it on my Mac as I use. Well, no, not anymore.
But Wes, if
I
it
was using to get to the thing on when I'm in an app on iOS, I can go look and it does the same thing.
But Wes, if it was for those people, then they would turn it on by default and say, you can turn this off if you'd like. It's not for the simple. It's for, hey, you guys might want to check this out because here's where we're going.
Yeah. Actually, I really
I'm not buying that, Kev. I'm sorry.
Apple Watch.
All right, you write this down. Write this day down. And when it happens, I want you to come back.
We are not wearing Packers clothing for your benefit. No.
That's right. I want all of you to put on a Packer jersey and say Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers rule.
If I had to do that, I would light myself on fire.
Well, then I want to see you light yourself on fire, pal, because it's happening.
It's not. Kev, I don't buy it.
Nah,
Well, you don't have to buy it, but it's going to happen because I wouldn't buy it either. If it's
seriously, guys, it's going to be the Apple Watch interface. What you see from the Apple Watch interface is the direction that Apple is going. They're going to a three-dimensional UI that's manipulated by forceful touches, either on a screen or on a trackpad.
See, I don't buy that.
I do. They already got the trackpad.
Layers in space. Look at the way that Apple has designed their UI. It's all about layers in space. It's a layer space and playing with light. It has nothing to do with icons on a grid. Microsoft thought they were going to go that route with Metro, but they changed. Apple's going that route, and they're doing it very iteratively.
Well, that's another sure way to make me go back to Microsoft and never touch a Mac again. Look, here's the thing. They're all different machines, right? And I don't understand why everybody thinks that your Mac should act like your iPad, and that should act like your iPhone, and then that should act like your watch. They're all different. Why do we have to make them all look the same? Why can't they be different? They're all different.
Well, I think it's more, I mean, right now I have my phone, my iPad, and my Mac. Okay, and I have a couple of Macs. I have a big iMac in my office, and I have my MacBook Pro at home. But for me, very personally, I use all of those devices when I'm getting my messages ready on Sunday. All of them. So I could be on my iPad, sitting at a coffee shop, working on notes with my Logos app, copying and pasting stuff in, doing all my background work, and I save it, and I go home and literally pick up my MacBook Pro, and it's right there where it's left off. You know, and I know Windows can do a lot of that stuff too, but what I'm saying is that's why they want them to look the same, because they want the average user, not the super tech guys, but the average person that's going to pick up these devices to be able to do this with simplicity in mind.
Well, I can see that argument, and I think on paper it makes sense, but in practical usage case, it doesn't make sense at all to me, and that's because I think the average user is actually a lot smarter than we think. And when I sit down at a computer,
I run tech support.
a touch interface is very different. The usefulness of a touch interface while I'm sitting with a keyboard and a mouse in front of me is very different. Now, I'm the guy who's got the Surface Pro 3, and I'll be honest with you, I also happen to have, by the way, you know, my MacBook sitting here. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes I reach up and touch the screen on this thing. And I go, oh, why can't I do that? So I like the idea of a touch screen, but I don't want the same interface on all of them because they're very different products. And so, you know, they don't.
Yeah, and Kev, I don't think the same interface is coming to all of them. I think they're going to borrow elements from everything and put it over.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think that's what they're doing.
As far as OS 10, I hope you're right, but
because they like a full screen app in OS 10 has a similar feel to a full screen app in iOS. But what Antoine said is very key, and it's all for me. I'm used to it because I worked on Linux for so long, so I'm used to having virtual desktops. For me, a full screen app is just running apps on different virtual desktops through the whole thing. So I was already used to it, and I run almost all my apps in full screen on my Mac, and I love being able to swipe up, see where they are, and click on it, or swipe left and right and go in the whole thing. And then I do the same thing on my iPad. I don't think it would have functioned the same way on the Mac had not they done it on the iPad first. But what Apple tends to do is they develop something on one piece of technology and they go, okay, that's cool. And then what Antoine said is they generally iterate it into their other pieces of tech. You're already seeing that with the Apple Watch because you have that force. What are they calling it? It's a deep touch or whatever it is on the or force touch trackpad on the new MacBook and on the new MacBook Pro. And from all accounts, I mean, I've seen things on I guess Verge and then TechCrunch, although TechCrunch, who knows, that the thing works really well. And the dang trackpad doesn't move at all, but darn it if it didn't feel like it did. So you're seeing them borrow elements from other pieces of tech, and they iterate in ways that make sense for the different devices. This was Apple's mantra. It didn't make sense to have a vertical touch screen because it's so weird to to reach up and touch things. And so I don't think they're ever going to get to the point where you're going to see the same interface on Mac OS X as you see on an iPad or an iPhone, because it doesn't make sense.
All right,
you said
I agree. I think you're right. It doesn't make sense, and we'll disagree about whether it's going that way. Let's talk for just a second. We don't have a whole lot of time left. We're actually over time. About the MacBook itself, and that brings up an issue that Antoine mentioned earlier about being good stewards of your finances. My opinion is anybody who buys that MacBook is not a good steward, because that thing is so overpriced for what it is.
No, it's not.
Oh, and I love my MacBook Pro. I think it's great, but it's got an underpowered processor. And
no, it's not.
It's basically a pretty computer with only one connector that I can't hook up.
No, it's not.
Two things to it, and so I'm incredible.
Overpriced.
What a mistake that is. That's so overpriced.
Antoine, tell me why it's not overpriced.
Not overpriced.
All right, well, go get me one. All right, I'll buy you.
I don't know.
Why are you saying it's not overpriced?
I gotta be honest with you, Adam. It's the same price as the new Pixel, so I don't know if I'm going to do that.
No, it's more expensive. The Pixel's lower.
The Pixel also has a far faster processor on it.
Yeah, that's only because I like doing development work. But no, I think it's actually it's pricey but not a bad value. It might be a little early. Pricey but not a bad value.
The Pentium M processor is so much slower than an Intel Core i3, and
it can be, but you got to remember they're using processor-wise, yeah, but they're also using better RAM. So they're using 4-channel RAM versus their usual.
Why didn't they put a Pentium Core? Why didn't they put a Broadwell, which also uses that kind of RAM in it?
Because they wanted to go fanless.
And they can get more people to fork over $1,200 for a computer just because it's an Apple and it's gold now.
No, here's the thing with Apple. This is a first-generation MacBook Air. Remember when that came out and the dang thing was $2,000? Why on earth would I want that? And now the MacBook Air, with the iteration of the technology, is now the budget consumer laptop. And so now this thing has come in. They wanted to, it's an experiment. And this is what Apple does beautifully. They experiment like this all the time. And while they're doing research and development out in the open, they're making gobs of money, which boggles my mind. They wanted to create, or see if they could create, a fanless laptop that had decent power, incredible battery life, and some of these advanced technologies that they want to put in, the Force Touch trackpad, the Retina display, and see what they could do with it. So, and they are going to sell gobs of these things, even though for you and me, I'm going, I'm not editing video on it. Wouldn't edit video on a 12-inch screen anyway, but it's not for me. For me, the new MacBook has two things that I don't like. The first is no MagSafe, which to me is a killer feature for a portable Mac. MagSafe is a beautiful thing, and I have no idea how many times that the 3 Macs that I have owned have been saved from my children because I've had MagSafe put in and they just run through. And children of any age just trip over cords. It just seems to be genetically part of them. So that no longer being there, that makes me sad because I really love my Mag. I love MagSafe. I know everybody complains they changed it for the different thing. I don't care. The thing is amazing. The other thing that I don't like is that on the Mac, on this new MacBook, there's only one USB-C port. So that I have to use dongles to do more than one thing at once. But to me, it's great. For years, all I'm hearing from people is complaining, Apple doesn't, they use proprietary connectors and they're always doing their own things and we have to do this and blah, blah, blah. So they come out with what is going to be an industry standard connection that you're already seeing devices from all these other people be released for, and you still have people complaining, well, now they don't have enough of these things. I'm going, you're out of your mind.
No, I'm not out of my mind. That's ridiculous to say that. What if I want to hook it up to an external monitor while my battery is low and I need to plug in my iPhone?
Oh, they'll be splintered.
It's a dongle. They already have the dongles out that have VGA and USB and a USB-C.
For $1,200, the dongle should come in the box.
Listen, I'm not going to argue with it. I think that the thing should have had 2 ports on it.
That's
with
what
all that life in it.
They
That's
should
what
have
I'm
done
saying.
what- oh,
I
let's
wish it would
Google
have at
it.
least 2 ports on it.
Kevin,
But
They should have
people
done
like
what-
Kevin,
oh, let's
people
see.
run around going, "This is a betrayal." I'm like, they've dumped Thunderbolt. They've dumped, like, they're going to a reversible USB-C. The theory is that this is what's going to now, like, Lightning's days are numbered because everything's going to be running off of USB-C. Like, it's just like, and people are now complaining about that. Like, this is it just makes my head spin. The thing should have 2 ports, but again,
It doesn't need 2
you're
ports.
essentially seeing a tech preview.
Kevin,
it doesn't need 2 ports.
It doesn't need it.
Tell you
I would
why
like
doesn't
it
need
to.
2. Yeah, it doesn't need 2 ports, and I'm a contrasted with the Pixel. The Pixel is a development machine. It's a Halo device, and it's really a Chrome OS development machine. It's meant specifically for the I am anal about everything Google, and I'm going to build some stuff to trap people in an AdWords-based application.
Right.
That's 100% the Pixel. The other side of that is that I want to do something a little bit more than just your basic web browsing. I have no, Google is cheap and Windows is mentally expensive kind of brained folks who say, I don't need an extra monitor. 12 inches of a screen is more than enough. I travel in a particular manner or I need to be portable, and my iPad full-size Air is not getting it done even with the extra battery / keyboard. And no, I don't want a Surface 3. Those people who don't have a need of a lot of dongle-type accessories, a $1,200 MacBook will work just fine. It will almost be perfect for them.
And
Their
Antoine,
solution
the
for
person
when
that
they
you're
need to go
describing-
further than that will be
The
an
person
Apple.
that you're describing is the mobile Apple fanboy. That's who
Mostly-
you're describing right now.
Mobile
And that's
Apple
who's going to buy
fanboy
this,
and
and
a good
Apple's
deal of
thankful
speakers.
because they've got plenty of them.
Yeah.
Paul,
But
let's give you the last word on this one.
well, Kevin, don't you remember when we got our our MacBook Airs, the first one? I think we were together when we got that one too.
Mm-hmm.
And that one was, I'm correct, that was over $1,200 when we first bought it. I think this is Apple's flagship. You go back to the very first iPhone that ever came out, and it was $600 with a 2-year contract. This is how Apple does things. And you know what? They are going to sell a ton of them just because they're Apple. But we're going to see next year when this comes out and the upgrade comes out, it'll probably be down to $999. That's what's going to happen.
Well, you asked me a question, so I'm gonna take a word, and then I'll give you the last word after that if you want. Yes, I remember that, but see, the MacBook Air in its day in 2010 when I got it. First of all, I was given one. I didn't buy one. I would never have bought one. Okay, but I was given one, which I was blessed to have been given one. For in its day, it was not an underpowered machine compared to other machines of its ilk. Okay, this is underpowered compared to other machines of that price. And then second of all, the original 13.
Are you talking about the first gen MacBook Air?
The second MacBook Air that I got for 13, I think it had 2 USB ports and an SD card slot and a power slot. Okay, I think Type-C is awesome. I want everything to go to Type-C, but I want more than one. I want one to charge and at least one other to connect stuff, because I'm often connecting things.
But it has 9 hours of battery life. Why do you need to worry about charging?
Because sometimes I need to charge my computer
Well,
while
no,
I work
yes,
on it.
I
That happens
get
to me.
sometimes you need to charge it while you use it. But if the device is built with the premise of you have a working day's battery, we in a sense it's asking if we've matured on our understanding of what these devices can do. If it has 9 hours of battery life that it's going to be able to do, why do we keep it plugged in for those whole 9 hours? Why aren't we using it untethered? And therefore now that USB-C port is able to be used for something else until it needs to be charged. So 5 hours in, okay, yeah, it's under 50%. I need to go charge it because I might have had it connected to a projector, connected to a monitor, connected to an external drive if I wasn't using a YB-based external drive. But, if
And 5
the
hours in, you
device is
still have
built
4 hours of battery life.
You know, I mean,
Well, we'll see about that, because I'll be honest with you. You guys earlier said that Apple doesn't lie about battery life. They do, because I've got computers that they say get 8 hours of battery life, and I get 4 to 5 to 6. Because I'm a power user, and I crank my screen.
Seriously, what are you doing? I edit video and get 8 hours on my MacBook.
Well, I don't know how. I don't know why. I don't understand it. I've tried to limit, but the stuff that I want to run, I get 5 hours at best on my MacBook Pro.
Holy! I have external drives, and I have 2 external drives plugged in, and I edit video.
Maybe mine is broke. Okay, which tells me another thing. If it's broke, then not everybody gets what they advertise it as. Okay, I don't know why mine.
That's everybody.
All right, Paul, you're going to have to sum this one.
We've been on here for an hour and 15 minutes, and so I think we're going to sign off on this, but this has been an interesting discussion. We didn't talk a lot about church and Bible technology, but we did have a good discussion. I appreciate all of you for joining us, and please subscribe to us here on YouTube if you want to get this. I'm sorry I didn't get the audio version of it up last week at all, and to be honest with you, I probably won't go back and bother now that we've... But I'll try to get this one up. So if you are only an audio listener and you're like, "Where was last week's?" Well, that's because I just didn't bother doing it because I had a really busy week. That's the life of being a pastor who works on the side and does a podcast. But thanks for being here, Paul. We really appreciate you coming and joining us. If people want to follow you on the great system of tubes, they're tubes called the interweb. How do they do that?
You can follow me on Twitter at Paul Culbertson, Culbertson. Facebook, it's Paul and Sandy, no spaces, Culbertson. And I guess I'm on Google Plus at paul@gracegladstone.com. Google Plus is new to me. I've never used it, so if you go there, you're not going to find much.
Well, it soon won't be around anyway, so it's okay.
It's not going to last long anyway. We're going to probably have to find a new way to do this here in a little while.
Skype.
All right, Antoine, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Kev. See
you
in
in
a
a
few
few
weeks.
weeks.
Be up there in a couple weeks.
Okay.